Good morning. Today we're going to talk about divorce and how it'll affect your PG&E retirement benefits. Also, how living in California, which is a community property state, will affect that, and what you need to know about a Quadro in as far as splitting those assets. Whether your divorce was finalized years ago or it's just in the works today, if you were divorced while you worked at PG&E, you should listen to today's show. This is the PG&E Retirement Show, brought to you by Marathon Retirement Planning. Hi, everyone. The PG&E Retirement Show is on Facebook Live each week at 11 a.m. and then replays are put up on YouTube shortly thereafter. We're glad to have you here. Again, I'm Dan Leonard of the PG&E Retirement Plan Show, hosted by Marathon Retirement Planning. Again, each week I'm going to review a topic related to your retirement plans, your benefits of some sort, 401k, healthcare, Social Security, Medicare, things like that. So please tag your coworkers who could benefit from hearing this too. And again, don't forget to subscribe or like to this page so you can get updates in the future. All right, so today's topic, divorce. And it can affect your benefits, as you're aware. Like I said, you live in California likely if you're working for PG&E. And if that's the case, you live in a community property state. And what that means is any asset acquired during your marriage is subject to the divorce proceedings. And as a community property state, that means your spouse is entitled to 50% of all of those assets. So whether it's you or your spouse, if you accumulated, say, $100,000 in your 401k all during your marriage, $50,000 of that is subject to the divorce decree where your spouse could receive that. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you the exact dollars and how that all works, but suffice it to say, this is my interpretation and experience of working with people that in community property states, it's 50% unless you can come to another agreement with your spouse. So what happens to a pension or a 401k is when you go through the divorce, let's say you worked at the company for 20 years and you were married for 10 of those years. Well, if your payment was going to be $1,000 a month for that 20-year period, now these are just made up numbers, but let's say it was $1,000 a month for the 20 years of service. Well, since you were only married for half of that, only half of that amount is subject to potentially going to your spouse. And because they're only entitled to 50% of what was acquired during the marriage, there would really only be a quarter of that, right? Because if you took 1,000, half of that is 500. They're entitled to half of that, so that would be 250. So if you had a $1,000 pension, you were married for 10 years, you could wind up having $250 of that go to your spouse. Now, what happens is when you get divorced, as part of the settlement, there is a property settlement. And in that is what they call a Quadro. A Quadro is a qualified domestic relations order. And there's really, there's not much that you have to know about what goes in it, other than if you want, you can call HR, and at the 800-788-2363, they do have sample Quadros and procedures for putting those on file. But if you were divorced while you worked at the company, when you get to the end of your career and you're going to retire, they'll know you were married and divorced at the company because obviously your spouse was probably on your benefits at some point. And they're going to want to make sure that the proper paperwork is in place because they don't want to be on the hook to have to pay those benefits back if something happens down the road. So the Quadro was brought into force by an act back in 1974 called ERISA, and that really is just the law that regulates all privately funded pensions and health plans. And it states that basically you need the Quadro to be able to split those assets so it can move from your spouse's IRA or your IRA to their other IRA, or split it with no taxation. So if you've got one, it's good to get it in place with HR so they know that they have it. Now, if your divorce is not finalized and you're thinking about retirement, you don't have to have the Quadro in hand to submit your retirement papers, but to start collecting the pension, you will. So if you don't collect on it, once you've retired, or you can't collect on it because the Quadro is not finalized, your benefit would accrue, but it's not going to be paid out until they know what goes to where. Another example of why you want to get a Quadro when you're getting divorced, or you want to make sure the divorce is finalized, and this is a real life example, is we ran across a client several years back that separated from their spouse, but never finalized the divorce. It was very amicable, but they just said, hey, I'm going to go live here, you live there. And the idea was the spouse was going to stay on the client, our client's retirement plan, or not retirement plan, benefit plan, still get health insurance, which is all great if you can work that out because you're still legally married. But what happened is when he went to file for the pension, put it in the 0% option, meaning I want the straight life payments to me until the day I die. Well, HR came back and said, hey, we show you have a spouse. Your spouse has to sign off on that. And again, in this case, thankfully, it was a very amicable situation because the spouse did sign off on it. But imagine you got separated 10 years ago, things happen, 10 years down the road, your spouse feels like, hey, I didn't get a good enough deal. I want part of your pension. So, a word of caution, I guess is the best way to put it. When you're going through a divorce, it's never an easy time, no matter how simple it may seem. So make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's and get everything that you need in place. And the first thing you need to do, or not the first thing, but one of the things you want to do is make sure that if there's a property settlement with a Quadro, that HR has a copy on record so that there's no holdup when ultimately you get to retire and you don't have to go find a spouse to get a signature on something or an ex-spouse to get a signature. Properly executed documents, you won't ever need to do that. But, being as it is a bit of an emotional time, sometimes things get overlooked. And again, on a final note, in California, that it's a community property state, just because you've got all the assets in your pension or all the assets in a 401k, it does not mean that those assets specifically have to be split in half. You could keep the retirement assets and your spouse might keep the house, or you might take all your 401k and split part of the pension and sell the house and do whatever. But it essentially is up to you to come up with that deal. If it's an amicable situation, the two of you can work it out together. If it's not, obviously that's when lawyers get involved and things can get more expensive. So if you have any questions on this, I'd be happy to talk to you. Certainly could refer you to lawyers that we work with. But the last thing I'll mention is the EAP program that you guys have access to. Got an attorney network that you can get a referral in your local area. Highly recommend using that because you get a discount on it. And I believe it's a free hour consultation to discuss it to start out. So make sure you use all of the benefits and, resources at your hands through PG&E because, again, you're working with a company with great benefits. Not everybody has pensions. Not everybody has an employee assistance program, which can help you. So I would use those resources, but would be happy to speak with you. Again, I'm Dan Leonard. You can get a hold of us at 925-726-401k or at dan@mrppfg.com. Until next week, hopefully we'll have a little bit of a less emotional topic, planning to talk about some of the key features of the new pension. Please post any questions in the comments below. I've gotten a few after these videos shut down. I'm always happy to go back and post a message to that reply so you can get it. Again, tag your coworkers and friends so they can benefit from getting this valuable information. And until next week, again, I'm Dan Leonard, your PG&E Retirement Specialist. Thanks a lot.